Hello everybody. In this video, we're going to look over at what might have happened if the Crusades were successful. But before we begin, I'd have to at first, as we always do, present information about the topic we're going to talk about. Enjoy. So, the Crusades were a series of military conquests, initiated by the Catholic Church. The most famous of these are the 8 Crusades, which span from 1095 to 1291, of which most, if not all, were intended as a reconquest of Jerusalem and the surrounding areas from the Muslims. The most famous crusade, the fourth one, started back in 1202 under the command of Pope Innocent III. The infamous sacking of Constantinople, which in the end was a major reasons why the empire was later conquered by the Turks, happened during that period because of the Crusaders, and not only that, they took some Byzantine lands, including some that the leader of Bulgaria during that time, Kaloyan, proclaimed as his. It's a very long story that I cannot really explain here at the moment, but in the end, Kaloyan won the Battle of Adrianople, otherwise known as Audrin and Edirne, which gave him the title Roman Slayer, and Emperor Baldwin, the one who led the Crusades, was eventually captured in the Bulgarian capital at the time and died while imprisoned. The crusade we're going to be choosing to be successful, along with the next wars after that, would be the 5th Crusade, which unlike in our time, wouldn't have failed miserably with a lot of deaths. Like our timeline, the crusade would start by first reconquering the Egyptian lands, eventually progressing northeast, towards the Holy Lands and Jerusalem. So, in order to retake these lands, they would have to first face the really powerful Ayyubid Caliphate, whose leader at the time was Al-Adil. Just as what happened in real life, the Crusaders would first siege the coastal city of Damietta, which would be successful, just like in our times. But unlike what actually happened, the Crusaders would go on to lead a very successful series of wars after that, forcing Al-Adil to sign a peace treaty, and accept a grand loss of land. He would also have to move the capital from Cairo, as it would be too dangerous for the empire, since it would have been close to the borders of the newly established Crusader Empire. For the sake of this scenario, we're going to use the name Latin Empire when referring to it, which was also the name for the Crusader-established government during the 4th Crusade. Lastly, before I conclude this first chapter of the history of the Latins, let me clarify, that unlike our timeline, the Battle of Almanzora would be actually won by the Crusaders. Next on our list of what would have happened is, I would propose that the newly established state would either create a union or just a cooperative alliance with the Kingdom of Jerusalem. For this video, we're going to assume that after a few years, both kingdoms would united under the banner of Jerusalem. Here's the map of how that would have looked like. Anyways, back to the topic. In the next few years after this union was established, I would say that there would have been relatively peaceful times. But after this time passes by, the Muslims would wage a holy war on the Latins. Because they would want to retrieve the lands of Jerusalem and Egypt that were previously taken away from them, I would say that this would be a pretty important object to them, hence why I think that many Muslims, not just from the Ayyubid Caliphate, would gather together to fight the Christians. After many brutal battles that the Muslims would have won, I'd suggest that Conrad II, the leader of the Latin armies and territories, would call upon Pope Gregory IX, who would gather armies from all around Europe, from Hungary to the Holy Roman Empire, and would deliver them to the Latin armies. Because of how much time it would take, and in the midst of this, the Muslims would have had the high ground in the war, many of the lands of the Kingdom of Jerusalem would be reconquered by the Arabs. If the current pope would have not brought help to Conrad II, I would guess that most lands, if not the sheer entirety of the newly established Latin Empire, would have been lost. So, that's my reason why I would propose that this war would be lost by the Kingdom of Jerusalem, with the land that we lost being shown right here. I would propose that afterwards, there would be few minor wars between the Christians and the Arabs, but nothing too much. The Latins would not reconquer much of the lands they lost after the war I mentioned around 20 seconds ago, only going as far as some lands near Jerusalem, in order to secure the capital from future invasions better. But these wars are nothing, compared to what was about to come. As both states were weakened by the previous series of wars, they would have less power to defend themselves from foreign invaders. And that is one of the main, if not the biggest reason why the wars and raids by the Mongols would be so catastrophic towards both of them. I would guess that, due to the weakening of the defensive armies, and strength of the Mongol invaders, the enormous empire would be able to take over most of, if not all of their lands. And as every time the Mongol Empire took over new lands, they would too, with this case, take many people to be their slaves. It might be possible, that both Arab and Jerusalem divisions might be created, just like what the Golden Horde was, but there's too many factors involved to truthfully tell. Well, that's about it in this video. Comment if you would like a part 2 on this series, and remember, it's all just a speculation. Thanks for watching.